Okay, so thanks so much for giving us the opportunity. We are a new JRS project, so we're at the start of the project. So we're coming today. We're very excited to be here today. We really hope you'll engage with us with all the experience of the people in the audience, and I think we probably have questions for all of you as well. Now let's hope that this. Okay, so we are a large team. I think we fill half the room today in the audience, and really nice diverse skill set from working on policy and conservation planning and indicators, and even web design from SANBI's team, and co-leading the project with all of our partners, from Doug Hairbottle from Saltplyke University, Michael, who manages the Quack and Sabab data sets, Rez, Pachi, and Vernon, who are statistical ecologists, and Francis and Ivan from Belgium, who are helping with the design of the web platform. So a really, really nice team. And then at the heart of our work, our project is these two citizen science supported data sets. And I think Michael will speak to them much better than me a bit later. But they are SABAP, which works in the pentads across the country. And then the Quack coordinated waterbird counts, which are site specific, up to 700 or just under 700 sites, and those sites are spread across different wetland types, or under the Ramsar definition, so from estuaries to rivers to dams. But we'd really like to focus the project at our wetlands themselves, which are really underdescribed, and these links between the birds and the systems that support them, not as well investigated as maybe our estuaries and even the dams. So yeah, and then so I think it's still worth restating, but our freshwater ecosystems are highly under pressure and threatened, wetlands themselves being the highest, and even our birds, although looked against all of the species that are dependent on aquatic ecosystem, the birds do have quite a high number of threatened species. And again, we also have in our extra to our team, we have two of our red list scientists in the audience today as well. So fire some questions to them as well. So yeah, threatened ecosystems, the data on the wetlands as well as the water birds is gaps. Could do with more consolidating, but especially to make it accessible to people. And I think Andrew's had this vision for a while to have this live platform with easily accessible data, these beautiful indicators that the National Biodiversity Assessment team worked hard to produce. Okay, so our focus of our project is to support management needs and reporting across the board. So we've moved ahead with identifying our first pilot site, and in line with also wanting to support reporting needs at all levels. So we kind of achieving quite a few things here in that we're working with site level managers, but we're also nesting that within the national reporting and threat status and our red listing, and then all the way up to our conventions. So this Barber's plan was actually the first South African Ramsar site, one of the first 6 in the world. So South Africa was really ahead of the game, and getting their first Ramsar site declared in 1975. But as with many of our sites, that's why our ecosystems are so threatened. It's not without its major pressures. And so you can see the arrow coming from the adjacent river, lots of pollution issues coming into the site, and the site in fact has got an artificial canal which brings water into the site, so makes it wet for longer year round, which is good for some of the bird species, but even that water is under threat. So water levels and over abstraction are also impacting on the site. But overall, it met our criteria for choosing a site, long-standing data, full-time manager on site, and yeah, a good case study for pressures and big management decision needs. So a very busy slide, but I wanted to speak to, again, our nested aims of meeting kind of our international convention reporting needs, our national reporting, and that the information that's feeding up into this reporting comes from the local level. It can be consolidated in different ways, and so the Flyway partnership, and then I've just kind of selected some of the stated needs out of their documentation, but it speaks to some of the types of information we'll be looking at related to population trends, finding out what are the drivers of those trends, improved knowledge of status and those factors so that they can inform improved management, and then of course the ever-present climate change drivers. So I'm hoping that the rest of the team will speak a bit more to this part of the slide. And just a very quick slide to acknowledge we've had several user needs workshops already using our virtual platform, but we can still do sticky notes and get big groups of people to work together and input their needs, and then Res magicked it into a nice graph to kind of exemplify hierarchy of needs again. Okay, and then just again context, so sorry, not the prettiest of slides, but the big orange in the middle is Barbara's pan, but just zooming out to say that our sites don't function in isolation, especially when there's water involved, and not only beyond the water catchment, there's the landscape, the broader landscape, and this particular landscape is peppered with many smaller wetlands of where the water is pretty seasonal, so the birds disperse and come back. So there's kind of a tangle of questions and drivers to work on that the project team needs to think about, and I'm going to so thinking of those context, we've honed into kind of 3 major themes to get started with, and maybe Andrew, if you could speak to this nice slide that you prepared.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all. So, we could drown in contextual data and ancillary data. So as a team, taking guidance from the site managers and some of the work around Ramsar and some of the other conventions, we're just looking at starting with like tools for 3 data sets. The first of which would be using methodology that we developed as part of the NBA, which is basically a really simple tool for tracking habitat loss in any zone of interest. So on screen at the moment is how we track habitat loss for something called the Ecosystem Area Index, and we are doing it with the vegetation type as the zone of interest. So it's just summarizing statistics on change, the rates of change and the magnitude for that. What we will do in this project is then apply that to zones that are relevant for the project. So quinary catchments or collection of catchments that Nancy and others experts will help decide on, or we could do buffers around wetlands. We could use any form or fashion of summary zone, but the catchments are obviously your prime candidate. And then what we'll do obviously in parallel is follow the wetland condition work that's been pioneered by Dean Ollis and others, and Nancy has been very involved in. And so we'll have these two little tools around how the landscape around the wetland changing, so that can be viewed together with the trends in the bird populations that are the primary goal of the tool. This ancillary sort of tool is just to help contextualize some of those changes. Is Vernon, I didn't see, is Vernon on the call, Nancy? Yeah, there.
Vernon, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. Wonderful. So Vernon, over to you for the next slide.
Okay, great. Let me just stop my video there. Yeah, so I'm not going to say all that much, but this is just another example of an ancillary data set we're thinking of adding to the tool. So it would be climate data in general. So I'm just going to talk about rainfall here. So what we're thinking at the moment is maybe using quinary catchments, and then basically summarizing climate data for the quinary catchment. So over here you can see Barber's Pan highlighted in that red polygon. So that's the quinary catchment for it. And then this opaque colored layer over South Africa is the Terra climate data set. So just rainfall. It provides monthly rainfall for the period of 1958 to present. When the paper was published, it was 2015. And then basically what we would do is we'd get the mean value for the quinary catchment. And then this plot at the bottom here just shows you the annual distribution of rainfall, monthly distribution of rainfall for different years. And you can see they're color coded here relative to how wet or dry they were. And then I've just calculated a very basic measure here. So it's the percentile of the deviation from the long-term mean. So this was just for 10 years. It's just an example. But basically to give you an idea of how wet or dry the year was. And like Andrew said, it's just meant to provide some contextual background to the SAVAP and Quack data that we're going to be analyzing. Yeah, and that's it for me.
Great, thanks so much. And so I think that's already exciting. We haven't even got to the bird analyses, but just that yeah, it's a lovely component of the project to have these analyses supporting the bird info. And then of course we've got this global water data set that's available to us as well. And in a similar way, we can run some analyses that according to the fifth order or the quinary catchment or whatever unit we decide that can be in the background to support the users and whatever particular questions they might bring. Yeah, so I think that's it for me. And I mean, this is just a subset of partners that are already also core to our project. So we're really excited that we'll be working with people, with our partners in an ongoing way. So you can see here a lot of the Northwest, like a really full complement. There's a few people's names I've left off already. I noticed. So a really good support and excitement from our partners involved in the project. And I think that's the last slide. Thanks, Jeremy. Will you want to allow a few questions during the course, or do you want to wait till the end?
Nancy, what would you prefer? I'm happy either way.
I think during. So I mean, there might be no questions yet, but if you wouldn't mind, I think at the end of each one, and then we love the long discussion session as well. But maybe a few questions during.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, Nancy. All right, so if anybody has a question, turn on your mic, raise your hand. If you prefer to store your questions up till the discussion at the end, that's also fine. So either way.
Are we good to go? I can't see hands, so.
Yeah, no hands
Yes.
yet. So I think we can probably move on.
Lovely, thank you.
All right, so our next presentation is coming from Francis, I think. Francis, yeah, would you, Nancy, okay, great. Francis, maybe would you like to share your screen and see if that's working?
Let me see. I'll just do it again. Can you see it? Not yet.
Yes, we can see it, Francis. And if you just go into presentation mode, that should be great. So yeah, up next we have Francis from Seascape in Belgium, speaking to us and giving us an overview of the proposed data pipeline. So over to you, Francis, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and indeed I'll just move along after Nancy's introduction and a bit setting the scene. I'll be immediately tackling the maybe most technical part. Well, our project itself is quite technical, let's say, in the development of the data pipeline. So I'll just go through it from the initial stages that we have up to, let's say, a first prototype that we are developing. Voila. So that's what I'll be talking about. So the initial concept idea was actually very straight line coming from Andrew, who once put this together. So it's actually focusing here on the QUAC data. We're also focusing in the second part of the project on the SABAP data, but it's really coming from observations to then the data collection, cleaning, validation, analysis, interpretation, then the tools where we really have the focus here with the SEEK team, who's going to doing the statistical analysis, and then coming up with a dashboard that's there for then decision making and overall status of the different wetlands and the different bird populations, etc. So from this initial concept idea, I just plotted on top what indeed Nancy already was saying, that it's really a work of many people joining in and bringing all their expertise together. It's coming from, first of all, the citizen scientists, which without them wouldn't be having these two magnificent databases, long-term database that we can work with. Then it's at UCT with the Fitzpatrick Institute that's maintaining and managing the databases, where Michael will tell more about in the next talk. And up next, it's actually an interaction with a lot of people, UCT, SEEK, and then of course as well the FITS, where we from Seascape Belgium also are involved in, together with Arbins. Just then at Saltplatje University, SANBI, giving all their expertise and input together with and stakeholder involvement. And then coming to the, let's say, the tools where I'll be getting help from Arbins, from Ivan, who will be our main backend developer, where I will also be assisting. And then there's also an element, of course, of capacity building, which is important in this project as well for SANBI, and as well as other people maybe interested who are here today. And then another aspect, which is also good to have this talk today as well, is to see how we can have interoperability with this and Cartosa people who are also involved in the other JRS projects. Voila. And then at the end we have the decision tool, let's say. So this is the initial concept, very straight line, but if you go into more what we would like to develop, it's mainly focused around the data mart. That's now in development, as well as we have to see what are the specifications needed and why we would need that data mart. So it's just actually the data mart, to define it for people who who don't know, it's a restricted area of data organized for decision-making support based on specific needs of a group of stakeholders. So that's why we had these stakeholder workshops to really see what do we want, and the ancillary data has been given examples of what we will use is by Andrew and Vernon. So what's the use and why is it useful to have this data mart? Well, first, it's easy access to frequently needed data. It's a collective view by a group of users that is put together, and it's also useful, of course, for the user response time when you're going to use the dashboard, that you're not going to go all the way back to the raw and initial data, where analyses, etc., will be much more faster when you're using this type of data mart. And also, it's, well, in this way, it's an ease of creation, meaning that it's not a full data warehouse or anything more complex. It's just, it's simple. It's it's less difficult than implementing a full data warehouse. But for potential users, it's more clearly defined, which will be clear in the course of the project. And it can just, we're going to pick out the essential data that we need for the analysis. Sometimes can be aggregated or can be enhanced. So we have actually from the raw data additional elements that we can add. So it's less cluttered and will make the analysis easier. And it just has the key information, key data information you need. So if we would look at a data pipeline pattern and how all things then are linked into each other. So from the data sources to really the people collecting the data into the databases, those are MySQL databases where again, Michael will tell a bit more about. And then there's also the ancillary data where just Vernon gave a good example. So actually we have the data in these time series of precipitation or temperature or whatever, where we're going to go into a kind of a means data that we have that we can plot then on top or on top of the results that we get from our bird analyses, let's say. So there's a bit of transferring this into that data mart. And then there are two elements which I think are also important. Is so on the one hand, we will develop an open API which will allow other people, researchers, students, people who are interested in just taking the data itself and just having the capacity to do analyses themselves on the data, to just allow them to have APIs on those. And besides that, then there's another element in this project where we are just processing the data. That's with Pachi, who will give a talk about that, ongoing work. Just more preparing the data in a way that for stakeholders, for users, we have actually, let's say, an interpretation of the data already in a certain way that we can help them to make the right decisions at the end. Just presenting these in a dashboard. On top of that, I just wanted to plot again all the players that are involved and the overlaps where we are kind of all working closely together. Although we have different, let's say, work packages, a lot of interaction here in this project, which makes it really really nice to work with the whole team. Just to give it in another view, more in this type of blocks, where you have the source data systems. These can be then the internal databases or external data. So then there's a data staging area where we're doing all types of processing and transforming into the data and the metadata storage area, where maybe an extra thing worth mentioning is indeed that besides the data, we want to add also as much metadata as possible in terms of just all additional data available for the wetlands. Just also important, like what status are they in, and etc. Just all that type of data can also be visualized then on the dashboard, as well as just adding additional data on top of the birds counts as we have in the occurrences that we have. Just looking at additional traits data, so just to enrich the whole dashboard as much as possible, also for interpretation just additional questions that people may have to maybe just work with the metadata as well. As well as when you want to download the data, want to have access to the APIs that the metadata can also describe as much as possible the different data sets that we will be offering. And then just an end user presentation tool. It's just the modeling tools, ad hoc query tools. Maybe even have a tool where we can just extract reports that we can give to the managers, etc. That we could give a kind of updates of the updated reports, and just in general, applications, visualization tools. So this is then to end my talk, the prototype that we've been developing. It's just a couple of screenshots. So it's just the first idea. There will be many things that will still be able to change, etc. But just this is plotting all the wetlands that are being monitored or have been monitored in the QUAC database, where then in the second step, coming from the API on the species that are indeed in the QUAC database, could go, for instance, to white-backed duck. Then again, an API call is then being done to get a list of all the sites where this species has been counted. And then specifically, because now we're focusing on the barbaspan, can select barbaspan, which then would give kind of a dashboard where just you get the information of the species with, as I was saying, maybe additional traits data can be shown there. And then a graph showing the state space model output. And on top of that, we will need extra pointers and more information on how to interpret this graph. And then below is, for instance, also a table where we could show an index of the last couple of years, showing if there's an increase or a decrease in the population density. You have to note that in the background, it's not the barbaspan, but just on the barbaspan, for instance, you could focus and do it other way around as well. On the map, you could just go and select a wetland, which, for instance, here has some, let's say, dummy data. But it's just to give an example of what indeed we are looking at, also for showing as much metadata we have on for instance, the barbaspan. So that's it from my side. If there are questions now, or I need to let it sink in a little bit, happy to answer now some questions during the discussion.
Thanks very much, Francis. Okay, I see we've got a hand up from Astrid. Astrid, feel free to ask your question.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the nice presentation. I was just wondering about the idea to have a data mart versus to have a full warehouse. I'm not so sure about these advantages. So my question would be, you said that you only show essential data on the mart. And my question would be, what is the rest of data that you leave apart compared to a full warehouse? Or if I turn it around, what would the funders say if you say you are only showing essential data, then and if you don't need the other data, why fund the collection of the other data then? So I'm not so totally sure where the advantages of this MART are. So maybe you could explore this a little bit further.
Yes, well, as we need to explore it still a little bit further ourselves, but it's more that we've seen that, for instance, when we are looking at the data that has been collected, which I think would best stay as the QUAC data itself, where the data is coming in as the raw data. We see that sometimes we are missing, for instance, counts on specific birds where we have to look at if they were counted or if they were not counted that year. And it's a bit as we would have to look back into the original data, and it's actually more maybe enriching the original data than letting out data. Then on some hands, on some occasions, it's possible that we clearly see that maybe the original data is not useful. So we're doing a type of screening that we would, in the end result, have on the dashboards, figures and graphs that are not correct. So we have to look a little bit at just kind of validating the raw data, and that's the idea where I would put in the data mart. So it wouldn't be really selecting it as such. It would more be just enriching it with lots of other data. So for instance, ancillary data would be there as well. So this would be the whole, let's call it database where we would work with, and just keeping the original data just as it is, where we have the data managers working on that, and then occasionally pulling in that data into the data mart. So that's the idea. Not really select. Yeah, maybe I gave an impression that it would be only selecting on very specific things. On the other hand, it might be that we're just developing it as such that we will start with barber span, and then the data mart will be around barber span. If we see that this is working, then it would be a selection indeed, but the idea at the end is to have all the information there.
But this then sounds that the mart is actually something that is a bit more than the warehouse or the original database, because it is enriched and it is quality controlled. So my question would be, if you enrich the data or quality control them, would they feed back then into the original database as well?
Maybe, possibly. Think maybe a better question to see with Michael on how he would think. Maybe I would say that from the original data, of course, before data gets entered there is already quality control, etc. But not always at the point where when we do the statistical analyses, other things might pop up. So that's the thing where we now want to really validate the correct database and say that database, which already has been a process that's ongoing, but now with this data pipeline, it will be on a more, say, global scale of the database. So yeah, it's something that we can take in the process of the project to see how we could then maybe go back to the original data. I'm always a bit worried to go change things in the original data, because then if you start changing it, what was the data that was coming in from the citizen scientists? So you have to be able to track it. So.
Sure. In any case, it makes sense to keep the original data, but But thanks for your explanations.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question.
Alrighty. Thanks, Astrid. Thanks, Francis. All right. I see no more burning questions. So let's move on to Michael and keep our momentum and dive a bit more deeply into some of the APIs, the SAB app, and the Quack data sets.